My name is Terry Thomas. I'm a UW staff member. I work here at the University of Washington Educational Outreach for professional and continuing ed. I'm a PR specialist here, and it's really been my pleasure to help produce this event and invite these speakers and provide some outreach so that we can address some questions that we know you all have. The purpose of tonight's event is to provide a way for you to network, to meet some of the programs in the open house that will occur out front in the cafeteria, and also to network with each other, with our speakers, ask questions, and for us to provide information that is useful and helpful for you. We know that considering graduate school is a monumental task. It's a financial decision, it's an emotional decision, it's a passion choice, it affects your family and your life. It's one of life's big ones. So we're here to help with that process. Tonight's event is called Navigating Grad School as a Working Professional. And I like to subtitle that in honor of one of our speakers here as Finding Your Way. One of our speakers is a current student in Geographic Information Systems, which is all about cartography, mapping, creating good communication plans so that people can get where they need to go. So in honor of Kate, who is our GIS student today, I think what we'd like to do is provide you a roadmap for some specific things that we know you have questions about. So a couple quick housekeeping things. If you need them after the speaker event, restrooms are just directly across from this door here, just behind you. We will be in here for about an hour-ish. We'll do some speaker presentations followed by Q&A. And then we invite you to stay for refreshments, a chance to network, and we've also got an open house with programs represented for the programs that we know you're interested in. So we invite you to stay for that. A couple quick things. You're in good company if you're considering continuing education. Just one little plug. Educational Outreach, which produces the programs that you're here to learn about, is just around the corner from celebrating its centennial. We've been doing this for 100 years. And just so you don't feel alone, last year, we reached about 47,000 students. So everybody has been down this road ahead of you, so we know you can do it too. So just a note of encouragement for that. We will have about 10 minutes for each speaker to talk, and then we will open up for a Q&A. I invite you to tweet a question. We'll be on Twitter. You can use grad school event as the hashtag grad school event. We've got folks who will take questions via Twitter and compile those for our Q&A. We also have mics, house left and house right, which you can use. And we hope to have a lively discussion when we're done with the formal presentation. We will be videotaping tonight, so I do request that you do turn off devices, cell phones, except for those tweeted questions. It will just help with our video and audio quality as we proceed. Quick, informal poll. Just a show of hands. I think it'll help you to see who's in the room. How many of you have attended one of these similar events before? Okay. How many of you have known for sure that you're interested in grad school for less than 6 months? Okay. How many of you have known you've been interested in grad school for 2 years or more? There you go. So that shows you that it's okay, that it's a difficult process to get there. It's a big decision. It's a big decision. How many of you know specifically what program you're already interested in? Okay. And how many of you think, gosh, I think I should go to grad school, but I'm a little bit lost and I'm not sure for sure which program that might be? Okay. That's helpful to see. All right, let's dive in. Feel free to come on down. Don't be shy. We have 4 speakers. I'm going to introduce them each very briefly, but I'm going to let them tell you about their academic journey and professional journey, because I just want to remind you all that careers don't happen in straight lines. They happen in detours, life changes. Most of us get where we get by degrees, one step at a time, and that's okay. So who we have here tonight, we have Ann Curtis. She'll be speaker number 1. She's a master trainer for the Princeton Review. She'll be addressing the GRE test and what you should know. We know the GRE is a big stumbling block for folks. There's a fear that occurs when you face that test. Followed by Debbie Bacharach, who is a writing instructor, editor, and writing coach. She'll be talking about how to write and deal with that statement of purpose and those essays that are part of the application process. We also know that's difficult for folks. Some people get halfway down the road of applying for graduate school and hit that essay and stop. But she'll have some tips and tricks for you. Number 3, we've got Sonia Duckworth. Sonia is UW staff here at the UW School of Social Work. She's a student recruiter. And she'll talk a little bit about how to target your application materials, how they work together, how they all complete a picture of you, and some resources that are there to help you, from open houses, visiting lectures, meeting professors, and that kind of thing. And then last but not least, we have Kate Weber, who is our student. As I mentioned, she's a current master's student in Geographic Information Systems, and she also took one of our certificate programs as well. So let's start with a very quick introduction that they can each give you about how they ended up where they are today, just in terms of academic history and professional history. So Anne.
Hi there. So I think as for many of us, I had a pretty winding route to this. I started off studying literature at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I loved that so much that I decided I was going to go and do doctoral work in literature. So I moved to North Carolina, went to Duke University, and studied literature for 6 more years before I decided, that wasn't it. So while I was in grad school, I started working for the Princeton Review. Worked with Princeton Review for 16 years in a variety of capacities, both as a business person and as a trainer. Taught lots of different courses during that time as well. And about 16 years into that career, I decided maybe one more detour, right? One more turn. So I recently went back to school a couple years ago at Bastyr University, studying counseling and nutrition. So I'm in the final year of my master's in nutrition and clinical psychology at Bastyr. So glad for all of the turns along the way.
So I'm Debbie. I'm from here in Seattle, and I got my undergrad at Swarthmore College in English. And then I worked in English. I worked at a writing center for a few years. And then I got my master's in creative writing. And then I kind of had 2 career paths after that. I was a poet. That career does not pay, in case you were wondering. And I was a writing teacher for 20 years. And then I had tenure, I had it, and I quit. I quit to stay home with my children. And I did that for the last 5 years, and just now I am starting my own business, my first time ever running a business as a writing coach and a tutor. And so I'm taking all the things I learned in previous skills and trying them in a new direction.
Sonia?
Hi, I'm Sonia Duckworth. I, just like Terry said, there are a lot of detours that happen in life. I started out studying architecture. When I got out of high school, I thought that's what I wanted to do in my life. But ended up, I went to Wazoo. I partied way too much. and my grades weren't very good, and so I dropped out of school for a while. I ended up, years later, going back to school and getting a degree in fashion design from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in LA. Moved back to Seattle, where there aren't a lot of design houses, as you guys might know, but there is one big major retailer who I worked for 15 years and was a buyer, shoe buyer. Then I decided I wasn't doing much for the world, selling very expensive shoes to children. Just didn't seem to be making a difference. So I like to say we have many midlife crises. So that was another midlife crisis I had. Decided to come back to the U, where I got my undergrad and my graduate degree in social work. with an emphasis on multi-ethnic practice, working with school communities mostly, and through a number of different kinds of social work positions, I came back to the UW, and I'm doing admissions and recruitment now.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm actually from Ohio, and I started my undergrad at Ohio State University. Midway through my undergrad career, I went to Germany and lived there for about a year and a half studying and working in some of the same courses that I had taken at Ohio State. I came back to Ohio State, graduated with a BA in Women's Studies, a BS in Environmental Science with a specialization in land management, and almost another degree in German, but decided staying for one more quarter for one class wasn't worth it. So with graduating college, I decided I needed to move because I didn't want to stay in Ohio. I wanted to experience the United States for a little bit. So I moved to the opposite coast, so I moved here to Seattle about 13 years ago. And of course, my first job was not in environmental science, it was working at a bank. Fast forward 10 years, and I decided that although I loved the coworkers that I worked with, I wasn't passionate about my job. So that's what began my journey of going back to school.
And you started with a certificate program, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And then you elevated to that master's program once that program was launched.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd love to dive in at this point. Here comes the roadmap part. I'm not here to talk. We've got 4 great experts, and we'll start with the GRE. Anne will walk us through some of the basic things she finds. She's worked with several thousand students, and she also trains the trainers who work with the GRE and through Princeton Review. So, Anne, tell us about the GRE. What do we need to know?
Thank you. Of course, there's so much more to talk about with the GRE than we can cover in this, so I really want to kind of hit the high spots. I do want to frame this. Many of you have probably heard that the GRE changed recently. So the information I'm going to give you tonight is about the new GRE. If you have any questions about the old one, happy to answer them later, but everything I'm talking about tonight is about the new GRE. And I actually want to start out by talking about what the GRE isn't. It seems a little backwards, but I think this can hopefully address some of the questions that you may have. The first thing is that the GRE is not an intelligence test. GRE can't test how smart you are. Interestingly enough, the GRE also doesn't test the kind of material that you'll be asked to study in graduate programs. It doesn't even ask you to write the kinds of essays that you'll be asked to write in most graduate programs. In fact, it's not even very good at telling how well you'll do in graduate school. It's not a very good predictor of graduate school performance. What the GRE does is something very, very specific. It's a really good test of how well you take the GRE, which is a pretty specialized skill. Okay? The good thing about that is that it's a skill like any other, and you can get better at it. If you think back to when you first learned how to tie your shoes, or type, or do yoga, or any of the things you know how to do in your life, when you first started those, they felt a lot less familiar than they started to feel after you did some practice, and the GRE is exactly like that. I like to think of it as sort of the best preparation is almost like test-taking yoga, right? It's really sort of building a set of mental muscles that work in a very specific way relative to this exam. Okay? So what it is testing is actually a lot of stuff that you already know, but you haven't thought about for a long time. Most of the material that's tested on the GRE is stuff that you learned in high school. Right? So yeah, you're going to have to do a little brushing up. Right? There's some review to be done. But the part of the GRE that can make it so challenging, other than a lot of the fears that we have going into it, is the fact that they're going to ask you to deal with this material that you haven't seen since high school really fast. Okay? So pick a number. Raise your hand if you picked a number between 1 and 10. Keep your hands up. Also raise your hand if you picked a number between 1 and 100. Okay? Keep your hands up. Also raise your hand if you picked any whole number. Okay? So if you look around, how come? Right? Thank you. Put your hands down now. So the GRE knows this, right? Because the GRE is really smart about how we've been trained to answer questions, right? Some person just randomly asks you to pick a number. You're relying on your prior training, right? Your prior academic training, your prior life training to answer that question. The GRE knows a lot about how we tend to answer questions, right? So that's the technical definition of what makes a hard question on the GRE. A hard question on the GRE is one that people tend not to answer correctly. And an easy question on the GRE is one that we tend to answer correctly. And knowing things like that about how the GRE works is what really will help you make your preparation targeted, okay? So as we sort of talk about how the test is put together and the kinds of things that are tested on it, I want you to always be thinking about your process through navigating this test in terms of really focusing on what you need to get out of the GRE and how you can target all of your preparation, all your planning to exactly what the GRE does. Because there's lots of ways that you can study and lots of ways that you can do preparation that isn't really about how this test works, okay? So taking a sort of step back then to what the GRE actually is, it's the GRE, the General Record Exam. It's sort of the adult version of the SAT. It's made by the same company that brought you the SAT. I'm sure you remember fondly. There are actually two kinds of GREs. There's the general test, and that's the one that almost everyone needs to take to get into graduate school. There are also a series of subject exams, and not everyone has to take those. Not all programs require those. In fact, many don't. So tonight, I'm just going to focus on the general test. If you have questions about any of the specific subject tests, I'm happy to answer them during the open house portion. So the GRE general test is a computer adaptive test, and that computer portion matters for two main reasons. The first one is a good one. It means that you can take the test almost any day of the year. Right? It's given most weekdays, lots of weekends. You can go online, register to take the test, basically making an appointment. You go to one of the centers, either in Montlake Terrace or Puyallup, if you're in this area, and take your test. But the other reason that it's a computer test that matters is that it's a 3.5-hour test on the computer. So part of your planning needs to be building your sort of taking long computer test muscles, which is something that we don't exercise that often. So in the same way that you have to prepare for a really long hike that you're planning, you want to prepare for taking this fairly long exam. It's about 3.5 hours. Okay? So when you take the test, there are three major categories of activities you have to do, or things that they're testing. The first thing that you'll do when you take the test is a series of 2 essays. Right? This is called the analytical writing assessment portion of the test. So 2 30-minute essays on topics you don't really care about, but one of them asks you to take a position on an issue, the other one asks you to analyze an argument. Okay? For each of those, you'll get a score between 0 and 6. Those are averaged. So in response to your essays, you're going to have a score between 0 and 6. You also have the quantitative portion of the test. These are the math questions. Okay? They just give it a fancy name. Just math questions. Here what they're testing is arithmetic, like literally adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing, algebra, algebra 2, and geometry. So when I said it was stuff that you were studying in high school and haven't thought about that much since then, that's what I'm talking about, right? The good thing is that the math that they're testing is a pretty narrow range of math in the world, right? There's no calculus on this. They're not even testing all of geometry, right? It's a pretty core set of areas that they're testing. So you can really focus your review in that area. You'll have between 2 and 3 sections of multiple choice math questions. And from those, you'll receive a score between 130 and 170. That's one of the new pieces of the GRE, is this change in this scoring scale. Okay? So you'll have a math score of 130 to 170. You'll also answer multiple choice questions on verbal reasoning. These are reading comprehension, a little bit of logical reasoning, and a lot of vocabulary. They test the vocabulary in context, in text completion. And again, the good thing here is that they're not testing all of the vocabulary in the world. Admittedly, it's not vocabulary you use very often, but you don't have to memorize the whole dictionary. So part of how you prepare for the GRE verbal section is by learning about the kind of difficulty of vocabulary that they test and focusing on the words that they're most likely to test you during the exam. Okay? So when you answer all the verbal questions, you'll also get a score between 130 and 170. Okay? So at the end of the test, you've got an essay score, 0 to 6. You've got a math score, 130 to 170, and a verbal score, 130 to 70. At which point, everyone always asks, so what makes a good score on the GRE, or what is a good score on the GRE? And the answer is, it's the one that gets you into the programs you want to go to, no more, no less. Okay? And that puts some of the burden on you to really do that research. Right? You need to find out, for the programs that you're applying to, what kinds of scores they're looking for, and how do they use them. So you need to contact the programs that you're applying to and find out, do you have a threshold score? Are you just looking for me to have a score above a certain line and then you factor in other aspects of the application? Are you looking for the highest scores possible, right? The higher the better. Are you prioritizing one section of the test over another? there are programs that look primarily at the verbal or primarily at the math, for instance. Okay? How does this program that you're applying to handle multiple scores if you decide to take the test more than once? And do they use the scores as part of any funding decisions? So that's the first thing you want to find out in building your own roadmap to the GRE, right? Is where do I need to get? The next thing is you need to figure out your timeline, right? So over the last few months, it was taking a little bit longer for scores to be reported as they made this transition to the new GRE, but we're pretty much at the point now where it's the regular processing time, so you're looking at, on average, about 2 weeks. So you need a minimum of 2 weeks, right? But you also need some preparation time, and you may want to be able to build in a buffer if you have that time to be able to take the test multiple times if you need to, okay? So you've got to work backwards from those deadlines to figure out your timeline. But the most important piece, in addition to figuring out what the scores they're looking for is, figure out where you're starting from. You need to take a practice test, because knowing where you need to get isn't the only piece of information that you need to figure out that roadmap. You need to know where you're starting from. So take a practice test. You can do that through ETS, the people that make the exam. You can also do it at the Princeton Review website for free, princetonreview.com. You can take a practice test there. It gives you starting scores. Then you can compare those and say, hey, if I'm really close, maybe all I need to do is a little bit of review. If I have more improvement that I need to see to get where I want to go, then you need to add in more time and you need to be more strategic about the kind of preparation that you do. Okay? So the one thing, I know we don't have a lot more time, so the one thing that I want to leave you with is really focus your preparation toward your goals, where you need to get, and really focus your preparation on the test as it's given. Because, for instance, the way you write the essays on the GRE is very different from the way that you write the essays on the personal statement. So, with that.
So before we go to Debbie to talk more about writing, I just wanted to remind you, save your questions. We will get to them at the end. And if you do want to tweet question as we go, it's please tweet using hashtag #GradSchoolEvent. Okay? You're going to hear a couple of themes tonight. One is do your homework and do your research. It's a long process. And another theme is to know your audience. Every program is different. They are not cookie cutters. You are all different. You are not cookie cutters of each other. So it's about matching who you are to what you want to do with the program that is right for you. And every program is different. So with that, let's segue to talking about some different writing with Debbie, with the statement of purpose and those essay questions that you see on applications.
Okay, so as Anne said, the essay that you're going to write for your application or to answer the questions is quite different than what you're going to do on the GRE. For one thing, you have more time. You don't have to do it in 30 minutes. You have all the time that you give yourself, which I suggest you do. And content matters. The one for the GRE, if you got to get the formula right, you're fine. For your application essay, the main goal of it is to take all of your statistics, your GRE scores, your transcripts, all these numbers about you, and make them come alive. They want to see your face on the page. They want to know about your journey. And I'm assuming most of you are here because you did not take that direct route. You went sort of a circuitous path to grad school. Great. They know that, they're excited about that, and they want to hear about that. So let's say you were a cook in Alaska for a while, and talking to people there and helping them made you realize that you wanted to go into social work, that was sort of where your passion lay. That is great. They want to hear about that. Sonia, we were talking earlier, said they're looking for the aha moment. When did you realize, when did you go, oh my gosh, this is what I want to go to? And then what journey did you take to get you there? A lot of people look at that question, the why do you want to be in this grad program, and they put it at the top of the page, and then they open up a blank screen, and they stare, and they stare, and they stare, and they panic. So this has happened to me. I'm assuming it's happened to a lot of you. I want to give you 2 ways to make that not happen. So one suggestion I have for you is to take out a piece of paper and make a list of categories. So categories like jobs I've had, volunteer work I've done, hobbies, skills, places I've lived. 10 key moments in my life that might relate to this career I'm thinking about. 10 key moments, I think, have nothing to do with this career. But you want to get all of this information about yourself out there without prejudging it, without going, oh, that has nothing to do with where I'm heading. And then I would look at this with a friend. I wouldn't just try to figure it out yourself. I'd have a friend help you think, well, maybe that one fits with the story or that one. And I say this from personal experience. I was writing an application essay about, the question was, talk about a time you failed. I thought, okay, and I thought about a job I didn't get or a course I didn't get into, and I wrote about that. And a couple days later, I was talking to a friend, and he said, how do you deal with all that failure in your life? You're just failing and failing. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But as I told you, I am a poet. And I send out a couple hundred poems every year, and if I'm lucky, I get 1 or 2 published. I have gotten thousands of rejections. I am failing constantly. I got 2 today. But in my mind, those weren't failures. That's interesting. That makes for a way more interesting essay. Why, to me, those aren't failures and what that experience is like and how I can use that. So you might have part of your story that is incredibly relevant to where you want to go next and be too close to your story to realize it. So I would get someone to give you some suggestions about that. The other pre-writing technique I want to give you, and I call these pre-writing because you don't want that panic of, I'm actually writing it, this is the part where it doesn't matter what you say. Set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes, open up your blank page or get out your pen, put that question in front of you, and write. And I mean write non-stop. Don't check your spelling, don't check your grammar, don't say, oh, this idea goes over here. And also, if you need to write, this is so dumb, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, just write it, just keep going. And what's going to happen is, what you're doing is you're telling your critic, the one who tells you all your ideas are bad, you're asking your critic to go away for a while, and you're asking your editor to take a little break, go have some coffee. And you're getting to the truth of your experience. You're letting your subconscious come out a little bit. And you will find something in there that surprises yourself, and it will have power. It will get some energy into your writing that you might not find in other ways. So those are both 2 ways to get moving in your process. Once you kind of have ideas, what you want to say, I want to give you some suggestions on how to say it. You want to avoid being generic, vague, boring. The way you avoid that is take the verb to be, conjugate it, by which I mean go is, was, were, am, any form of the verb to be. Go through your essay, circle every time you have that word, and get rid of it. If you revise every sentence so that it doesn't have the verb to be, which is the most flat, boring word in the English language, and has an active, energized verb in there, you've already elevated your essay several steps, and it's jumping off the page more. You also want to be specific in your nouns. You want concrete nouns. You want sensory details. And the way, in, let's say, a 500-word essay, you get all this while covering what you want, is to focus on small moments. So tell people very small stories that symbolize, that stand for a much bigger truth in your life. So in addition to talking about yourself in this essay, you need to connect with your audience. So you need to show the grad school you're applying to that you know who they are. So again, you need to do your research. You need to look up what courses that are offered, what careers that you might possibly go into, the research particular professors are doing in your field. And be able to talk about that or show who you are and your journey connects with that. And if you don't have a particular job goal that you want to come out, that is fine. If you can show them that the way of thinking from that field is a connection for you and you understand that way of thinking, that's great. They're going to be really excited about that. A couple other just little things. Follow the rules. I can't tell you, I've read a lot of these essays, and when the rule says 500 words and you've written 505, we notice, and we either don't read the last 5 words or we reject your whole essay. They can be very persnickety about stuff like that. So make sure you follow the rules. Make sure your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation, all of that is correct. There's kind of an interesting balance here. On the one hand, you are putting your heart on the page. You are really writing in a very personal way. And on the other hand, this is a formal document where you need to sort of be professional and formal in how you present yourself. So both of those things are happening. I've sort of mentioned along the way asking your friend to look at it. I've had many students, especially from other cultures, who feel it is cheating to have anybody look at their piece of writing. They sort of have this vision that a writer is, alone in their garret, and if anyone gives them any sort of feedback, they have cheated. So I'm right now telling you, in this culture right here, that's not true. You may get help with your essay. We encourage you to get help with your essay. However, if you turn to your friend, the English major, and say, could you write my essay for me? That's cheating. And you know that. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. That's obviously cheating. What you should do is turn to your friend and have a list of questions for them. Where did you get confused? What else do you want to know? Knowing me, what else from my story should I add? Where do you want more details? Ask them questions and let them ask you questions. What you don't want to let them do is pull out their red pen or their computer equivalent and actually go through, cross out, fix your paper for you. You don't want that to happen. That's crossing the line. So that's the balance that you're looking for. And finally, I just want to say, and I'm sure this will be echoed throughout, take time. This is a process, and you can't write a brilliant essay overnight. Some of you might have done this in undergrad and gotten a fine grade, but I would ask you to please give yourself the best shot possible. When I meet with students, I usually have 4 one-hour meetings. We have a pre-writing session, a drafting where they sort of write it session, a revision session, and a proofreading session. And that is in addition to all of the work that they've done in between time. So I would think to yourself, you sort of need those 4 stages of writing and map out when you're going to do them.
Thank you. I would just add that really the essay portion is your moment. Some of the other things are strict. They've got timelines, they've got deadlines, they're data-driven, it's the GRE, it's test scores, it's application information, it's transcripts, but the statement of purpose is yours. And often it's a differentiator to set you apart from the crowd. So it's a very, very, very important piece. We'll go next to Sonia, who can talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available to help applicants, and also what the roles of recruiters and advisors are, and how all of the elements when you're applying actually work together. The review committees don't see things in a vacuum. They look at all of those things together. And it is like your branded self coming to the application process for the program that you are specifically interested in. So Sonia.
Thank you. So as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, wow, there are a lot of common themes going through what we're talking about. And I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that I am a recruiter, and that is an unusual position to have in most programs. So the people that you will typically be dealing with, if you call the main office number, are advisors who are working with current students with their classwork, both undergrad and graduate students. They will usually hold open houses or information sessions. That's typically what my role is also in the school, but I specifically spend a lot of time on the road. I've just come back from being on the road for the last 2 months talking to hundreds and hundreds of students. So actually this kind of event is actually unusual for me because I'm used to being at a table and you're all coming to me at once. So bear with me on that. We talked about doing your research, and it really is kind of important for you to think about what kind of professional you want to be, and talk to the people who are doing the jobs that you're doing. That, I think, is the first step. For me, that was kind of when my aha moment. I thought about the things that I really enjoyed doing, working with families and children, And then I thought about the kinds of things I might want to do in a profession in the long run. You want to check out, basic things like the university's reputation, the program's reputation. Accreditation is important. I can say that, especially if you're thinking about going into a certain kind of practice, you want to make sure that the degree, which all of our degrees are accredited, are going to get you to where you need to go. But it's always really important, not only for looking at coursework here, but looking at programs outside the University of Washington. We talked about, Terry mentioned faculty members, and I want to say that contact the main office. If you want to talk to a faculty member, it's best to contact the main office first and ask what their process is. So for me at the School of Social Work, you can go to our website, you can find the faculty members' email addresses and what they're interested in, and you can shoot them an email asking a question. I was sitting here writing down do's and don'ts about when you're going through this process, and you don't want to be overly aggressive in any aspect of this. So if you send an email to a faculty member, remember that they are usually teaching and researching or doing some professional practice, and it might take some time to get back to you, but more often than not, they will. Or the main office will make that connection, that introduction for you. Information sessions are very important to attend. Program forums, we have all kinds of orientations, open houses. Those are the best ways to make connections and get your questions answered. When you're doing your research, also you want to think about, we'll list things like class profiles, and I think the biggest thing, people get really panicky when they're applying for graduate school especially, and you look at the profiles and you see, last year's class came in with a 3.5 GPA on average, or, everyone has been working for 5 years in the field. I want you to keep in mind that those are averages, and so for our program, a GPA can range from a 2.8 to a 4.0, and we really are looking holistically at your application. We're looking at your essay, we're looking at how you've lived your life, basically. And by following the instructions, by making sure that you pick references that are from a variety of areas, that's going to give the admissions committee the best picture of you. So this is your time to shine. Like we talked about in the essay, think about all the great things that you've done. Everyone has a hiccup in their life. You heard everyone up here say, how many different lives we've lived so far, and we're all very young. So, so don't let that intimidate you. The other thing is that it's if you're not 100% sure, go for it. What's the worst that can happen is that it doesn't happen this time, but maybe it happens next time. In the last few years, we've had record numbers of applications, and so it is more competitive, but like I said, there isn't a cookie cutter applicant coming in. The things that I think are that we look at and what makes a great applicant are following the application instructions. They will not read past 4 pages or 5 pages. If we don't offer information, interviews, one-on-one interviews, then you just shouldn't ask for one. Don't send us cupcakes. At least until after you've gotten into the program, and then you can send us all the kinds of things you want. And a thank you letter, it actually doesn't even always, isn't always necessary, but it's a nice thing. From my standpoint, it's a nice thing to get. I like to see those kind of things every once in a while. Financial aid. I know that a lot of people kind of have that aha moment after the financial aid deadline. So if you're considering going back to school next year, one of the biggest things I would say is make sure that you know what the financial aid deadlines are. And the deadline for the University of Washington is February 28th every year. So you go to FAFSA, the Federal Free Financial Aid website, and you do that. I usually make my daughter do it every Christmas. So that's part of her Christmas break. And then at least you know that if you make that decision, whether it's a UW or even a community college or one of the other universities in the state or out of state, that you've put that information in and you're going to be in the front of the line for financial aid. At the graduate school level, you may or may not know that it's a lot harder to get scholarships and grants. A lot of it is loans, but you want to make sure that you get that FAFSA in. So that's very important to do. You can go online and it takes about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to fill out. They'll ask you about your tax information, but you can guesstimate it. And when you've done it later in the year, if you're like me, you wait till April 15th, on April 16th, you can go back in and update that information. Let's see what else. And if you're an alumni of the University of Washington, the Career Center offers assistance with writing your essay and preparing for your graduate school application. Also, like I said, it's very important to make contact with the programs that you're interested in, not only by attending the workshops that they have, but and ask them what do they have to offer. We do writing workshops to help prospective students prepare their applications. Like I said, the Career Center does things, so it's really important to check around the university. If not, I think that some of the libraries will, especially resume writing workshops, because those are going to be important. So that's another good thing. Some of the extra criteria that goes into looking at your applications, a lot of the programs now have a community service or professional experience component to that. So if you have not been, say if you're a social work applicant, if you've not been volunteering or doing it's paid or unpaid work, now would be the time to start investigating some avenues. And there's no right or wrong. So if you want to go back to nursing school and there is a component that you have to have some field experience, and say you want to work with elders, then I would look into volunteering with elders. That way, when you do get into school and you find out that, well, maybe that's not my best forte, you're more prepared for making the decisions on what kind of practitioner you want to be or professional you want to be.
Sonia, before we go to Kate, and just in the interest of time and keeping things moving forward, I did want to have you address a little bit about letters of recommendation, letters of reference, because I know that's a stumbling block for folks. Who do you ask? You've been out of school a long time. Do you ask job, professional peers, academic folks? If you could address that briefly, that would be great.
So letters of recommendation, like I said, the whole application is actually a big picture of who you are, how you live your life. So your essay is going to talk about one part of your life, your resume is going to show different parts of your life, and then the recommendations is a great way of showing another part of who you are. Typically, most schools are looking for 3 resumes, and what I will tell students is, say if their aha moments happen in the streets of downtown Seattle, if it's a social work student, but they also spent 2 years in the Peace Corps after they graduated, it would make a ton of sense to make sure that one of those references was someone from the Peace Corps who could talk about your experiences, your challenges, your successes, your leadership skills. If you've been volunteering at a place for a while and I know you well, that would be another great person who can speak to your abilities. If you're, say, a business student and you've been working for a startup business for a while and you've helped lay the groundwork for that organization, that would be another person who could speak to your degree that you're seeking to do. So you want to make sure it's a variety of people. You definitely don't want to make sure that it's not your family members or your best friend, unless unless they've been your boss, I guess, for a while. You want to make sure that they're varied. If you're newly at a school, then an academic reference would also be make sense, but it's not definitely necessary. Not every school requires a GRE, and so that means that you have to, in your writings and in your recommendations and stuff, the things that would typically be looked for in a test would be looked for through your application.
And I'm guessing we might have some specific questions about those letters, which we can get to. One last reminder, if you do have a question you would like to tweet, use hashtag #GradSchoolEvent, and we'll take those questions. So last, we've got Kate Weber here. She's a current master's student in GIS, and really her task tonight is to share with you some of those roadmap anecdotes and bits of advice and wisdom from the trenches that she might have wished she knew 2 years ago herself. That's the challenge I gave to her, and she's going to share a little bit about some things that have worked really well for her, some things she wished she would have known if she was sitting in the seats that you're in tonight. So go ahead, Kate. Thanks.
Thank you. So first of all, I wish I would have known that this event existed, because all the advice these women have given tonight has been great, and that would have helped tremendously to start my path. But I mentioned earlier that I had decided for a career change because although I love my coworkers, I was bored with my job and really wanted something that I was passionate about. And so one day, since I was bored, I went on the internet and just started Googling some things. I went back, kind of thought back, what did I like as an undergrad? What really, sparked my interest? And I even looked at previous jobs that I had had. One of the jobs at the Ohio State University was creating groundwater and surface water maps. And I had actually had a class in GIS, Geographic Information Systems, which is basically just taking geographic data and mapping it. So everybody's familiar with Google Earth. That's GIS is behind the scenes creating that. So I thought about that, and then I just started Googling GIS in schools, and lo and behold, University of Washington came up, and that they had a certificate program. And I'm glad I Googled it on the day that I did, because I found out I had 3 weeks to apply to get in that fall quarter. And there was tons of things to do before then. The resume, the application, the $50 fee to get in, all of that. And so I scrambled, I got that together, and I submitted it, and then you sit and wait. But meanwhile, they did have this event, so I had Googled more things like what else is at UW. And I just kept trying to figure out what could I get involved in, because even though I had submitted my application, I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to see what else was out there, because I didn't know what I didn't know. So this event came up, and I actually thought, well, that might be a good time to network with some of the other students, network with some of the faculty showed up, and I found on the list of people that were going to be attending the table was actually some of the board of directors that were making the decision on who would get into this Geographic Information Systems certificate program. So I went and I introduced myself. I said I applied, asked them some questions about their job, about the field in general, had made a comment that it had been about 13 years since I had been an undergrad and actually taken a class in GIS, and was it even feasible to be thinking about getting into a certificate program? And they thought it was, so that gave me hope. And I got in, so I was very excited by that. And then I realized there was also a prerequisite for getting into the program. So because it started in the fall, I had plenty of time during the summer to be able to pick up that prerequisite and be done by fall quarter. And then getting back into school was a challenge too. After being out of school for 13 years, I thought, not a big deal, but it is. It's a drain. Emotionally, physically, you're constantly running from work, going to class, then having to go home and do homework. And one of the challenges I had was with family. You have to really think about, before you make that decision, whether you go to grad school or you do a certificate program, is how does this impact my family? So what they estimate right now for my grad school program is for a 5 credit hour class between 25 and 30 hours minimum per week, studying, reading, things like that. So what I did was I put up a schedule on the wall, a calendar on the wall, and I mapped out where can I carve out those 25 to 30 hours of time. Because it is a lot of, commitment. It's a lot of, having to say to your kids, oh, I'm sorry, I can't go to your soccer event or something like that. So think about the impact to your family. So then I got through the certificate program. Well, I was on my last quarter, and another one of these events popped up, and I decided I was just going to pop in and figure out and introduce myself to other people, see what's next. Again, as a networking event, to see who showed up at the GIS certificate table, but also to see if there's something else, because GIS, now that there's been a recession, they're starting to look for basically two people in one. So what other skill sets can you offer them besides just GIS? So I went there and I found out that next to the GIS table was a new graduate program in GIS. So I talked to the professor who was promoting it, and I applied for that. And what I had to do was you have to go online for this graduate school, and when you apply online, they have a checklist basically of things that you have to fill out. The GRE, you have to do your essays, and the application, the fees, all of that. So what I did is I counted back. I found out on the GRE website that it said, lights went out.
There's a light switch right back there by the, thank you very much, appreciate that.
I discovered that it takes approximately 6 weeks from the time you take the GRE test for those results to officially get to the university. So I counted back 8 weeks to give myself some time in case there was a glitch, and that's when I scheduled to take the exam. I was actually on a very fast track to be able to apply because it was a new program. I had found out about it in May, and I had till July 15th to get everything done. So I don't recommend taking such a short time studying for the GRE. But I also looked at what was my weaknesses regarding the GRE. And my weakness was math. So that's what I focused on. But I did still take some time and look at the formula, basically, of how do you do the essays and how do you answer all the other questions. So, and then writing the essays, I had to write 2 separate essays, which to me were very similar. So I had kind of a difficult time there. But I had an English major friend who she actually read everything I wrote, and she would provide feedback. And it was great because I always needed a second pair of eyes to review what I was doing, because after a while it all looks the same to you. And even leaving it for a week and coming back to it. So that was really, really, really helpful. But the other thing I wanted to tell you guys about is during this whole career change thing, I was actually laid off from work. So on top of trying to figure out how am I going to pay for college, I'm also trying to find a full-time job. And what do I do because I'm in the middle of a career change? Do I apply for jobs with my old job, what I used to do, or do I move forward? Because if I'm truly committed to doing the career change, then wouldn't they want to see what I was trying to move towards? So what I found out, and as part of being on unemployment, is that the certificate program was one of, there are several out there that qualified during unemployment. So you still got unemployment benefits, but you could still go to school. They didn't pay for it, but at least I had that option where I didn't have to worry about work right away. And so if anybody who's on unemployment, you might want to check that out because there's lots of programs out there that meet that match. So just look on the unemployment website for that.
So I'd love to transition us now so we have a chance to address some of your questions. If you have a question and would like to step to one of the house mics, house right and house left, you're welcome to come on down so that everybody can hear. I also have a couple of questions via Twitter. And this room is actually small enough that if you raise your hand and speak loudly, I can hear your question and rephrase it, then we might be able to address that question too. So let's start with a couple that came in by Twitter. Here's a real specific one about the GRE. What is the best vocabulary resource for the GRE? And you might add to that, folks who, for whom maybe English is not their first language, if you might address that too.
Thank you. So there is a list of the most frequently tested difficult words on the GRE called the Hit Parade that Princeton Review compiles. And you can go to the Princeton Review website, which is princetonreview.com, and sign up. There's a tool there that will allow you to get one word a day emailed to you. I don't know if you can get it texted or Twitter, but there's a way to get that there. And there's also a portion of that list that's available on the website. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is to really think about the fact that there are 3 types of vocabulary words. There are words that you definitely know, there are words that you definitely don't know, and there are words that you sort of know. And that can be a particular challenge for people for whom English is not a native language, and also for people for whom it is. So I would also ask you to focus on the words that you kind of know, because those can be really challenging given the way that they're tested on the GRE. So that's a place to start. There's also ETS, the company that makes the test, has a book, an official preparation book for the test. There are lots of these out there. If you actually just go through some of the sample questions, that'll give you a very clear sense of the difficulty range of the vocabulary you'd like to test. So there are lots of resources out there, but Hit Parade is a really good place to start. There's also, not to...
I'm going to give her a plug here because I guess I'm not sure if she was too shy to do that, but there is a book that Anne has helped to author, which she'll tell you about.
So yeah, I wrote a book called WordSmart for the GRE, and it's actually a list of the most frequently used difficult words on the GRE with quizzes and definitions and sentences and context and things like that. And that's, I don't know what it retails for right now, but it's available, it's a Princeton Review title, it's available at Barnes & Noble, it's at all the libraries and so on, so that's a good place to start.
Okay, another Twitter question. Sonia mentioned the holistic application review process where they're starting to take into account the whole person, who you are, how you've lived your life, what kind of value can you bring to this cohort, this class that is going to travel through this adventure together. I want to add that a lot of programs are creating that cohort very deliberately. They want people with very specific different life experiences. So this question sort of gets at that. It's regarding the holistic application review, how normal or common is it in certain fields? In other words, I'm guessing the asker is asking, are there certain fields where we see that really happening more? Do the STEM classes, in other words, the science and tech and engineering, are they different with that? Are there some variables?
It's probably hard for me to say, I'm going to speak in general and not in absolutes. Even when I was actually thinking about preparing for this talk today, I was doing a little bit of research online. And it looks like, you know, the Harvard School of Business was talking about a more holistic approach to applications, like schools, all the social work schools across the country, Columbia, UCLA, UW, we all take a more holistic approach to application processing. The same with nursing schools, public health, public administration. They really are looking at a cohort model across the board, whether that's an evening professional degree program or a day program. They really want to make sure that a breadth of experiences are brought into the classroom.
And I would add to that one of the reasons for that is that a lot of the learning happens within your cohort from your classmates. And so there's a deliberate attempt to create a group of people who will travel this grad program together, who bring different knowledge bases to that program. I know that's a big factor. So another question. If I want to go to grad school in a totally different field than is my current work area, total switcheroo, 180 degrees, what do I do? The question specifically asks about writing samples, but I think that there might be some larger questions underneath that. So let's start with the writing first. If someone's really reinventing themselves and feels they don't have transferable things to write about, why don't we start with you, Jen?
Do you mind?
Sure.
Because I went from, like I said, I was a buyer at Nordstrom's, and then I decided to become a social worker. So I think that's a pretty significant turn of events. What I did in my writings, what I did do is exactly what Deb said, is I sat down and thought about what I was passionate about and what I was doing with my life at the time. So I was very involved in my daughter's school, I was coaching soccer, I did a shoe drive at work. So I found ways to show that even though it seemed to be a significant shift in career, it wasn't necessarily a significant shift in who I was.
Anybody else have something to add there?
I thought that was great. The question sort of presupposes you're looking at your skill set and how can you transfer those skills. And I think what Sonia's saying is you can also look at your passions and your interests, and you don't have to, unlike a cover letter for a job application where you really have to talk about your skill set and how your skills from before apply to the skills that you're going to be using. In this letter, you can talk about how your passions and interests from your life are now applying to this new interest.
Do we have anybody who wants to come to the mic or raise a hand? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, when I looked at the graduate school applications, they've all required at least 2 or 3 professor recommendations. And it's been 10 years since I've been in school. Do you have any recommendations for what we can do in order to obtain professor recommendations who may not remember me or who may not even be at school?
So I'll repeat the question over the mic so the House can hear that and make sure we're all on the same page. Question is about if you haven't been in school for 10 years or even longer in some cases, and your program is asking for an academic letter of reference, and you're reaching way back to an undergrad history that may be very distant, how do you proceed? And what's the right way to do that? I'd love to throw that to Sonia, perhaps.
It seems kind of odd that for this kind of program that they would be asking for academic references, considering most people who are applying have been out of school for a while.
Can I ask you what your program is that you're interested in?
Graduate school for civil engineering.
Civil engineering, okay.
You know, are you working in engineering at all, or any?
No, I have an undergraduate degree in engineering, and I spent the last 10 years in finance.
Okay. Because what I was going to suggest, well, number one thing I would do is call the office and clarify. The way the MyGrad system is set up, that sometimes things don't always get updated as quickly as they should, even though the school itself, they might have some more information on the school's website about that. But I would also call and verify. The other thing is a lot of us, as working professionals, a lot of times we do take classes, continuing ed type classes, or maybe trainings and things like that. And you might consider one of those, and one of the people who've been through a training with you. The other flip side of that is maybe taking a class. If there's a class that's required that you don't already have, usually they're not required for application, but you could take it ahead of time, just to show that you're ready to go back to doing the graduate school work. That's really what they're looking for, is for someone to say that you're ready for grad school work.
Go ahead, and then we have time for one more brief question, I think.
So I just want to say that's what I did. When I was ready to go back to grad school, I took classes as an adult special student, and if I got in, they were going to apply toward my grad program, and I took classes with main players in the department, and then I had them write my letters.
So what it's called, actually, if you're looking at the University of Washington, it's graduate non-matriculated. And so you can apply, and if there's room in a class, once all the current students have registered, you can sometimes take classes. Just, and like she said, if you take the class and you take it for a letter grade, then when you do get into the program, you just won't have to take the class again.
We will have time for questions out in the cafeteria area for these folks. Is there any last question for here? All right, I really want to thank you all for coming. I'd love to thank our speakers. Thank you for